The topic at hand that we are having today is the role that academicians can play in promoting respect for presidential term limits. And of course, if you've been following the webinars with any regularity, you might have noticed this is in a broader spectrum of consolidating democracy, especially here in Africa. And we're looking keenly what is happening in Kenya and Uganda. And just to remind you as well, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. That is what Nelson Mandela said. And I want just to buckle down to discussion and remind us of what Henry Giraud said, who is a renowned scholar, in his seminal work, Higher Education and the Siege, Implications for Public Intellectuals. He said that, and he argues that substantive democracy simply cannot exist without educated citizenry. And I would just want to begin from that particular note and throw it to you, Dr. Wandia, because yes, we're talking about the society and we're talking about the academia as well. Where is that interface? Is there a disconnect? Let's begin with you.
All right, thank you. The disconnect is artificial. Dr. Kanyinga has told us what the problem is. We have a public discourse driven by politicians and funded by financiers trying to make the academy and the university look irrelevant and preventing academics themselves from researching into issues that would make them quote unquote relevant, ignoring the views of people who are researching and thinking. And most of all, as we have seen in the press lately, they want to shut out the poor from the universities and imprison young people with debt if they are to seek an education. So the disconnect that is there has been imposed by the people who want to now change the presidential term limits. And there's a reason why they do this. The university is just one of many spaces where people come together to discuss ideas and to reflect on society and where they want to go. And reflection, of course, means that you're also studying the past, studying other societies, doing research. All that is part of informing public conversation. So this is what they don't want. They don't want public conversations. And let me just say that what is happening in the universities is what is happening to the arts. It's not just universities that are being attacked as spaces of democracy. The arts have suffered even more because artists are not being supported. They are being made to go through loopholes to bring performances. So this is not just a university problem, but the way we university people experience it is unique in the sense that the political class and the financial class keep saying that there's nothing that we offer. So Kenyans and East Africans should know that this disconnect between the universities and the rest of the public is not generated by the internal character of universities. It's a political project of making East Africans, alienating them from spaces where they could come together and think and discuss and generate ideas. And so we must also look at what is being said about universities in light of even this presidential desire to increase, to remove presidential limits. Because basically the idea is that the political class and the finance class that is supporting them don't want us to have conversations and to be more proactive in determining our destiny.
But one will argue, Dr. Wandia, that this particular epoch of time that we are in right now, with the clamor for to push the boundaries for presidential term limits, it is not the first time that we can see this disconnect really arising, right? There's a rising chorus that people are arguing that colleges and university has become self-absorbed, sort of ivory towers, disconnected from and fundamentally disinterested in pressing societal problems. So this is not the first time. We cannot really say, yes, given the political climate around East Africa, this is when now we can see them not really or disengaging with academia.
Well, we have to look at it from two angles. The first one is to look at it from the angle of the state. What has the state been doing in terms of university education? And one of us mentioned the persecution of intellectuals, the fact that many were killed and were exiled for trying to be involved in community issues. So that has been there since, it has been there even since colonial times. It's not something that even started with the current, with the independence governments. At least in the example of Kenya, the British didn't even want us to go to university in the first place because they felt that it would make us start asking for independence. And they were saying that the lesson of India was that if you let the colonized get university education, it becomes a political problem. So this onslaught against higher education for African people is not new. It started from the beginning of colonial times. But let me also say that there is an element of complacency from us, the academics. After we saw our senior colleagues being persecuted, we decided to keep quiet and just just teach, go read notes in class, make money, buy a cards that are a butchery. So we accepted the narrative that life is about money and property. And so we saw the university as a conduit to accessing money and property. And that is why it looks as if we don't care what happens in the public. Because really, I think a lot of people are afraid that if they talk on public issues, they will not get the promotion, which is true, by the way. They will not get promoted. They will have a difficult time with their academic careers. So basically, if we academics, and this is what I should end with, if we academics want to be part of the society, we must put our skin in the game and just be like other Kenyans who are going through great odds to say that this is what we, the people, deserve because we are human beings.
Right, thank you. And I think, Dr. Wandia, you raised a very important issue, and broadly, maybe we can now try and unpack it. That of, academic freedom and institutional autonomy. So we have, yes, the intellectuals that are being persecuted when you're talking about promotions and you become greatly shy. But if we may just interrogate this, how do you see it fostering presidential term limits and consolidating democracy? Yeah, if we have academic freedom and institutional autonomy as well. So many of you, as Wadia says, you become greatly shy to progressively pursue some of these democratic tenets because you fear persecution, you fear, your career path being curtailed as well. Maybe I should throw this to Dr. Osogo.
Well, tough issues there. I really don't know even how to enter the conversation. Let's begin by saying that the African state is based on witchcraft and theft. So it's a place for looting and bewitching each other. And that space has no room for education. I think that's quite clear. Education has no place in such a context. And so you don't need...
Quite discouraging to say, Dr. Ali.
Yeah, you don't need academics. You see, if you wanted to invent something, to innovate something, then you can ask the experts in the area, how do we solve this problem? So for example, now we have a crisis, a global crisis. You might be asking the experts, how can we get a vaccine or medication? That's how you invest in research. But you're not interested in innovation, so you don't need those people that do that. And in any case, because you are the god of darkness, you don't want light, and academics bring light. That's what knowledge does. So the constant pressure on academics is that they're not needed. That's how I feel it. So for us who are in the democratic, constitutional, human rights space, we are in serious trouble because whatever we say is always geared towards limiting the power of government. The government is not interested in that. Allow me to also go back. I talked about the colonial legacy as well. My view about education was that education has never been a government project since the colonial days. My take is that education was a missionary activity, and the missionaries were not interested in education. They were interested in converting souls. Only that, incidentally, to convert souls, people needed to read the Bible and the Quran. And so you had to give them some basic learning, arithmetic, grammar, whatever, the 3 R's, so that they can now take part in that activity. At independence, we see some effort to start some schools to educate Africans. But most of the ideas I see here was to just create a mass, a working mass to run the economy. So it's about wealth, and you mentioned about the ills of wealth. And recently, we have a lot of university education, a lot in terms of numbers and quantity. And if you look critically, the universities are just two types: one, public universities, and 2, missionary universities. What is the end of a public university right now? Just to train people, basic skills, I think. Not think. You don't want critical thinking there. What is the end of a missionary university? I believe a missionary university is also geared to the same agenda, which is to evangelize. So when we talk about academic freedom, for example, I don't think that's something either of these spaces want in a big way. I'm not talking about my university. I'm just talking about general approach. And so for you to have the freedom, you need to be empowered. You need to be empowered by your institution, for example, the university. You need to be empowered by the government. You need to be empowered by the state. And your resource must be used. My answer is that I don't see academics have existed by a miracle to this date, because they would not have been there. They're working at cross purpose with the state, and they're actually unnecessary in this setup.
All right, talking of academic freedom, maybe I should drop you in, Prof. Karuti, on this as well, to just also broaden understanding on this and the institutional democracy, so to speak, or autonomy. We've seen a case in Uganda, and I know also, Patricia, you're going to share here, where we have, one of your colleagues is from Makerere University. This is Stella Nyanzi, who has been going through a harrowing torture with the government because of, sentiments and expressions regarding also the dictatorship, so to speak, of President Museveni in Uganda as well. Prof, before I just head over to Patricia, maybe you can comment on the institutional autonomy and how that is stifling democracy. Because yes, you want to speak out, but also you're looking at where you're getting your source of living, which is within the confines of the institutions. So you cannot just get to have enough room to swing your cards.
Thank you very much, Debe. Let me begin by pointing out that actually the first generation of public intellectuals began with some of us young fellas in the early 1990s. We were just a few of us who started writing pieces in what used to be the Financial Times, Gatabaki's Times, authoring a few papers, articles in the Sunday Nation on matters that touch the society. The generation before us was not able to do that simply because of the circumstances and conditions in which they lived in. So it is within my generation that we started seeing what we can call public intellectuals who started playing a very important role in the struggle for multi-party democracy. I'm mentioning this simply because universities then, one would say that were faced with quite a number of challenges. One, there was the authoritarianism of some kind, of very, very, very strong kind, if I can say that, and also the individual choices. And I'm mentioning individual choices here because there were many who would have had the opportunity of becoming public intellectuals, and they could not. Simply because of the fears and the circumstances that surrounded everything. And from then on, things have continued to change. Now, when it comes to freedoms, academic freedoms, you notice that even in the institutions, public and private institutions that we have are funded by the government. And because of funding that is predicated on government, it becomes very difficult for universities themselves to enjoy the freedom in the manner that they should be allowed. Excuse me, please. I wanted to explain that the problem is about funding, that
yes.
the universities are dependent very much on governments that have no respect for knowledge, governments that have no respect for objectivity. If it were the governments that respect ideas and knowledge as an enterprise, in fact, governments would be saying, let's liberate the universities to be a place for worshiping talents and worshiping knowledge.
But I have to butt in, Prof, a bit, if you may allow me, because this topic about funding from the government has been, bandied around for a long time. And the question that I will ask you is, because we've seen even from the Western part of the world, that we have universities that have come with very novel, innovative ideas that generate income, that even some of them are funding the government. Why are we here, especially in the country, never gazing on funding from the government, which even right now as we speak, according to the dailies yesterday, this funding might stop. So what will happen if you don't get funding from the government? I think that should just go along the way to assist you in trying to just give you a launching pad to try and come with your own innovative, good ideas that are novel and they are not in this, out of this world, that can generate income and you be self-sustaining, Prof.
To be honest, let the government cut funding but give universities autonomy to generate their own funds. Let the university not bother the university. Let the government not bother the universities about how they are going to make their own resources. I can tell you with a lot of certainty.
Yes.
When the universities started the commercial programs, all of them became independent to a very large extent. Of course, how that money was used and how many of them put the money into research is questionable, because all of them went into buying buildings in town. Every university now has a building in town. We have our own tower. Everybody was not thinking about the content and the future. But if we were told to generate our own funds, I think we would be in a position to generate even more than the government is getting. But the government departments began being interested in what universities were earning. At the University of Nairobi, I'm certain the government wanted even to take over the University of Nairobi Enterprise Fund, UNES, and treat it like any other parastatal, saying that you have no, you have no freedom to raise the funds without accounting it to the government. So let them cut the funds, but then let them allow the universities to make their money without any obstruction. And let them not treat then the universities like parastatals. If they allowed us that way, Debonair, we would make more money than actually what the government is giving the universities. But it's that freedom that is lacking.
But I'm inclined to wonder then, where is a place of institutional democracy? When you're talking about the autonomy there, why can people like you raise voices within the institution so that you can have that particular liberty?
My friend, I've raised, we are not alone. We are many people who raise these issues. When I authored the article on 2 universities in 1, I was speaking that same language, because the universities are no longer a place for making knowledge, and it's not a place for academics like me. The university belongs actually to what we call the administrative university. Administrators, the clerks. I don't know whether you have been at the universities, public and private, in recent times. You'll be shocked about the kind of lifestyle that administrators live. You just get it by seeing how the parking lot looks like. The administrators get parking lots, they cover them with the sunroofs and name it. And the reason, of course, is simple. Many of them never meant it actually to be in a university in the first place. So they came to the university by doing different types of courses. And when they arrive, they say, I'm a professor. Actually, they call themselves professor equivalents, right? So that's how down we have been. We have got gone the wrong way, that we have gone the wrong route, because even someone who has not been to proper schools and who doesn't have good knowledge in anything is a professor equivalent, right?
Thank you, thank you. I think there are a lot of issues, of course, within the institutions that, yes, as you can see, Professor is really speaking animatedly about. Patricia, let me cross over to you, and I gave you our case in point, especially from your institution, broadly as we are speaking about institutional autonomy as well and academic freedoms. This is a good case in point in Uganda. What is happening with Stella Nyanzi right now? I don't know if she's out of the slumbers as yet. Maybe you can bring us up to speed. Good.
Yes, thank you, moderator, for this. Now, you asked me about Stella Nyanzi. Well, firstly, Professor Stella Nyanzi brings in a new style of advocacy that is really unconventional or controversial by the use of her speech, the metaphoric language that she uses. And for many, they find it quite interesting. She has many Facebook followers who read her, who follow her Facebook communications and even send them on to other social medias for those who do not really have Facebook. But you find that many people actually appreciate her concerns, although her style may be questionable or controversial. Now, and when you read, she's really speaking about issues of governance in this country, issues of leadership, issues of corruption, provision of social utilities. There were issues around provision of sanitary pads to girls in schools. And these were really topical issues. If you go, even education, access to education, when she used unconventional language to refer to the Ministry of Education, who is also the First Lady, hence leading to all her court woes. So you find that her concerns are really legitimate as any citizen. And we have a duty as citizens, really, to, under Article 17 of our Constitution, to protect the Constitution and fight for promotion of the rights in the Constitution. But Stella, the ways Professor Stella Nyanzi has been treated tells you of what we are talking about here. The persecution that academics, are not just academics, even other activists, political activists, human rights activists, go through in our region or our countries when they are really trying to put their foot down on issues of governance, politics, constitutionalism, and democracy in this country. There is stifling of freedom of expression for many. And for Dr. Professor Nyanzi at the university, she actually had a case following her, the time she undressed and had that moment. She then had a case before the Makerere University Tribunal. What I know is that the case was poorly managed by the University Tribunal. There were irregularities in the trial process, and that even speaks to persecution just beyond the state itself. Imagine even your own colleagues at the university who should ensure that principles of natural justice are observed in the process in a disciplinary tribunal violate those principles, maybe because they have some political interference. I am not sure. I don't sit on the tribunal, but I can only assume. Why would members of the tribunal, which tribunals have lawyers to guide the process, fail to follow due process of the law when hearing disciplinary processes against any member of staff? So to the best of my knowledge, I think her case before the University Tribunal was appealed before the courts, and the court actually awarded her. They overruled the proceedings before the University Tribunal. They were irregular, they violated principles of fairness.
I wanted to come back to Dr. Wandia. And of course,
can I just mention something about Stella Nyanzi, just to end
yes.
what our colleague was saying. I think we need to congratulate Stella Nyanzi for speaking truth to power. Uganda is no longer a democracy that we would have been proud about like we were a couple of years ago. Uganda, by all names, is a new form of dictatorship, but a dictatorship that is propping itself into power simply because of the manner in which Museveni came to power, by convincing all the rural citizens and in all poor areas that you are enjoying the peace because of what NRM did. So it's just living on the history and trying to constrict the space around which other politicians, around which other individuals can enjoy that particular peace that he himself wants to credit himself with. And therefore, when Stella Nyanzi gets out of the way to demonstrate in the manner in which she has demonstrated, she is just explaining and expressing herself of the need for Museveni actually to start listening to many other voices. Unfortunately, the way Makerere University treated Stella Nyanzi speaks a lot about that lack of autonomy and freedom that we are talking about the universities. And that's why Makerere cannot be counted to contribute anything to the development of Uganda, because it's co-opted and constricted in terms of what it can do.
All right, thank you, good sentiments. And of course, we'll come back to you, Patricia, having heard what Professor Karuti has just said.
Yes.
Let me just, we'll come back to you because I think there was a poor connection with the internet, but I just want to give an opportunity also to Dr. Wandia, just listening into what they're saying. Dr. Wandia, you talked about artificial disconnects, right? That's why we can see there's this wide chasm between the institutions of higher learning and the government. I wanted just to remind you what we have here from one professor. We're saying higher education, this is Henry Giraud, I mentioned him earlier. He argues that the public intellectuals must consistently and forcefully make the case that their higher education is essential for a healthy democracy. And he was defending, of course, what the public institutions are doing, and not really the public, but higher institutions of learning, where you do not have interdisciplinary sort of nexus where you're working together. There's a system of what they call the silo culture, that most of your work cannot even be related to the layman. It is so esoterical. It is going way over our heads. And so could this also be a contributing factor when Professor Karuti is talking about the government disengaging with the institutions? You're not speaking the same language, right? And I know your domain is language. Dr. Wandia.
Let me explain what universities are. I already said that universities are just spaces like any other, where people come together and reflect on the issues that are affecting society. They are no different from the arts, and they are no different from parliament, by the way, because even parliament is about people coming together to talk about issues that are affecting society. So universities are not unique in that way. It's just what we do, that we pursue knowledge through research and teaching. That is what makes us different from, let's say, the culture and the arts, where people are doing performance as a way of conversation, church, where people come together to worship, or parliament, where people come to discuss politics. So what is happening to the universities is what is happening to other spaces, and especially the culture and the arts. They are shutting down spaces for people to come and talk. That's the basic agenda of shutting down universities, is to make sure that people are not talking about the things that affect them, so that we limit conversations to parliament and to the church, which are, if we remember, those were the two pillars of colonial rule, where the missionaries were and where the colonial government was. So when universities are having conversations, there are two levels at which we have conversations. There's the level of the conversation with the public. So we talk about general issues and we try our best to be as accessible as possible. And we also talk with students who are younger than us, who are not as specialized as us, so that we learn how to engage with the public at that level. But there's also another level of the technique, because you see, even as academics, we have to keep tabs on each other. We have to make sure that we are not flouting research ethics, that we are being ethical and we are being held to account, that our research is legitimate, that we are not cooking up stories. So that kind of research on the state or on the discipline itself is the one that might seem inaccessible to the public. But it's just a private conversation between academics, just like in a household. In a household, you invite visitors and you talk about yourselves, but there are some things you keep between the family members. And it's not just about privacy, it's about intimacy, so that you keep each other in check as good citizens and good family members. So when the government is telling us, or telling the public, because it's not even us they tell, when they're telling the public that our research is useless and that we are just talking high-flying things there, it's because they are going for the wrong research. They're going for the conversation between academics, and yet there is research and knowledge that we are generating, which we try to give access to everybody else. And when we do that, that is when the government cracks down on us, as happened with Gogewa Thiongo, when he did a play with the people in Limuru. That was when he was persecuted, because he made his knowledge accessible to the people. So even when you see people like Stella Nyanzi is showing that we academics can no longer breathe. We have been imprisoned in the walls of the academy. We are not allowed to have any effect beyond ourselves and beyond the university walls. And then the very people who imprison us by denying us funds are the same people who come and tell the public that we are generating useless knowledge. If the public wants to know whether we are generating useless knowledge, I want them to come. Let them visit us. I would be very happy to have them in my classes. I show them that what we do. But this narrative that we are useless and we are generating knowledge that is out of touch is a political narrative. It's not a reality. And let me just also say that because the university is a democratic space, just like culture and the arts, just like parliament, just like religious worship, just like family, that must be funded by the public. The public has an interest in making sure that their taxes go to making sure that the universities can speak without fear of political consequences. So, and the thing is, when universities accept to generate money themselves, they are now entering the realm of the banks and the financiers and the accountants. And then they start being told, you cannot say this because it will not bring money. You cannot do this for students because it will not bring money. So even if people might be making money now, the democratic cost to Kenya is far more expensive than the money that the universities may be able to generate. And so Kenyans must, and East Africans also, they must fight for the university to not be a space of persecution. They must defend academics, but it's not just academics, it's artists. It's pastors who don't want to just toe the missionary line. It's for anybody who is bringing important conversations to the public that must be defended. They are the messengers whom we must not persecute for the message they are giving us, because public discussion is how a society survives. You cannot survive when everybody's keeping quiet and waiting for the government to tell us what to do. We must all be part of the conversations about the matters that affect us, and universities are just one institution that help with those kinds of conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just, I have seen your hand, Prof. Karuti, but I'll come to you. Let me just rope in Dr. Abani here, also to just weigh in on this interesting developments as well, especially where the research is concerned. And you are the sharpest head of the dilemma there. I wonder, we have the National Research Fund from the government. How has this been effective? And I know maybe this is for the public institutions, yours is private, but broadly speaking, as an academician, you might be aware of what is happening, especially with the funding as well. Do you think also the state resources can be used to stifle democracy? Just briefly, and then you can give reactions also from... Yes.
To be honest, I'm not an expert in that kind of funding. I haven't been involved there. But I think all the other panelists are clear that if you are being funded, then you are likely to play the game of the funder. Many of the funding comes with conditions. So for example, most of the funding I've seen from the National Research Fund have tended to be towards sciences, which was what Professor Karuti mentioned at the beginning. There's a belief in this country that sciences are the most important, and any funding coming from the nation, you will see, will seem to prioritize hard sciences. Secondly, the other funding that we are likely to access would be the private sector. So assuming that Google is going to fund my school, maybe a different school, maybe a school of computer, whatever, and I want to complain about Google's human rights policy or gender policy as a human rights person, the university is likely to tell me, you can't do that, you see, because Google is bankrolling a department, a different department. This is not a true case, I'm giving an illustration. And then that shows you that whoever funds you then is likely to have control on what you do. And I think the right thing then would be that let us fund universities without asking questions. Give them money, like we give the Department of Defense, and we don't even question their expenditure most of the time. Let's also not question it in that way. We can audit it for proper use, but let's not use that to limit freedom in the academic space. And if you allowed me, moderator, to respond also to the issue that you asked, Njoya, I am of the view that the university is a colonial project. The university is currently constituted. And this colonial legacy is a situation whereby you have literate people and illiterate people. And so university has always been a place for elites, intellectually knowledgeable elites. So there's a divide between the knowledgeable and the unknowledgeable. And that's a colonial legacy. The African society tended to have everyone get the basic skills they needed for survival. What we've been unable to do, and I think I agree with you, Ainea, is that we were not able to decolonize the university so that it is relevant to the communities. It needed to sit with the community, to communicate with the community, and to talk about things that are relevant to them. In the discipline that I'm trained in, called law, students are likely to be reading the laws of 1780s in England for most of the time. They might not know what is happening in their communities. We are colonized in a sense, and what we teach and learn, the diction, the language, the communication, is all foreign. And so in that sense, I think I need to add that in addition to the funding problem, there's also the colonial problem, which we need to work on as academics. Thank you.
But Dr. Mbani, do you think maybe we should be raising accusatory fingers to the colonialists and their curricula? I think it's the onus of the academicians like you to actually address that particular problem that we have right now and come up with a proper curriculum that is not harking back to the history of the colonialists. So why should we be here and then we're belly aching about, our current system, while we're reading about the history of England and their laws, Magna Carta and all?
Yeah, I can talk about myself as a law academic. The curriculum in Kenya, law curriculum in Kenya has around 20 compulsory courses that the law has stipulated from the Council for Legal Education, all that. Students have to learn those courses, mostly colonial. It's possible actually that a student would go between first year and fourth year without reading a Kenyan. It's possible. And if the teacher is colonized, it's even a disaster. So what I have done personally, you can audit this, is to begin, for example, a group here in Strathmore called The Heart. And students in The Heart have one policy: we only discuss African writers. And not colonized African writers, because it's possible to have an African writer who is simply quoting Montesquieu, Locke, and Enlightenment scholars and all those useless ones. It's possible that we can have our own indigenous knowledge generated by indigenous people talking about our problems and cultural issues. So on the issue, for example, of Stella Nyanzi, an African woman undressing is not an insult. It is not immoral. It's not something for disciplinary action. It's a tool that African women have always had to make a voice. So if you're reading from Western sources, you get it wrong. But if you're reading from an African cultural vantage point, you get it right because she was communicating. Africans communicate that way, especially elderly women. That's a tool they have at their disposal. They normally don't have violence, by the way. That's one tool they have, and it's very powerful. You'll remember the Freedom Corner, our women here. It changed society just by undressing. And for you to understand that, you have to decolonize your viewpoints, and that's what I try to do in The Heart, in my limited space. But to change the whole curriculum is going to take a whole world to change. I hope that answers you. Yeah,
it does. Thank you. Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Prof. Karuti, I think you had a point of information before we gravitate to other issues or to the next questions. Next question for you.
It is in regard to what Dia talked about, and also the question that you raised regarding what some people generally call ivory tower knowledge.
Yes.
My reply to that is very simple. There is no proper knowledge without a theory. So anyone who talks about universities being a place for theory is actually saying the right thing, because all knowledge must have a theoretical basis for it to be relevant. I don't shy from saying, yes, theory is very important, but most important is also how we apply that knowledge. Now, I'm raising this simply because the government and many other people find that one as an excuse of running away from the universities and looking for knowledge from elsewhere. But if you look at how the West has built itself, if you look at how the West is interlinked with the universities, the defeats of this world, the USAs of this world, they are what they are simply because they tap knowledge from their universities. We have no instance of where we can say the government of Kenya, the government of Uganda is now tapping from Makerere University knowledge in this particular area. It's only recent times when they have started getting interested in Makerere's making of a car. Now they're interested in Kenyatta University because of a ventilator. But after coronavirus, no one would ever think that Kenyatta University produced one, or the University of Nairobi has also produced many of those particular kind of innovations. I am simply saying that there is a disconnect between the nature of our national development, which is not led by evidence and research and knowledge, and what the universities produce. As I said from the very beginning, what we do most of the time finds relevance in international development organizations and in other governments rather than our own governments here. I have been reading documents by different, I won't mention which governments, but I'm happy to find my name there, quoted severally in what they want to do in Africa. And yet you'll never say that this is what Kenyan government is tapping from the people at the University of Nairobi or Makerere or Strathmore. And that's a disconnect that we must start paying attention to. The same thing with the politics. We usually say things that are not very good for the government because we speak truth to power. The issue of term limits, for instance. There is a reason why the term limits, whether good or bad, have been put into place. It's simply to ensure that the society renews its way of thinking and corrects abuse of power that is likely to come with the concentration of power and abuse of power for a longer period of time. I know Kenya and of course Tanzania have institutionalized this, and therefore it will become extremely disingenuous for anyone to think about extending beyond the 2-term limit that is there in our constitution. But look at Uganda. There is no sense of creativity that can ever come from that government as long as we say there is no regeneration in terms of...
Yes, Prof, good points you raised, but the main concern is that, you know, you as an institution or academic, you know, a fraternity, so to speak, you've been remaining very mealy-mouthed about this particular issue here in the country, collectively to speak to it, right? And this is where we tend to wonder, where is the place of, you know, our scholars to come and address this, even through the medium, or through the media that is a traditional media or other mediums that we do have such as this, because you are remaining silent when this thing is still festering. When it blows up, then what? As maybe one day she's put it, you don't really have your skin in the game at this particular moment.
Let me just try to correct you. As I said from the very beginning, if you look at the struggle for multi-party democracy, if you look at the struggle for the new constitution, many of us were involved as public intellectuals. Many of us were involved as public intellectuals, producing research that informed the entire process. And I can tell you during the struggle for multi-party democracy, people like Kibuda Kibwana, people like Smokin Wajala, who is now at the Supreme Court, were depending essentially on research to drive the struggles they were driving. And that research that was being carried out was being carried not from elsewhere by young people like Ambani from the university. That has been going on, but there is that disconnect that we have been talking about. That disconnect is not only with the government, but it's also there with the new entities that are seeking to get into power. But most of them, I must say, are also informed by research that is being carried out, though not at the same level as we have had in the past. If you look at Tanzania, if you look at Uganda, I would like to say again, intellectuals are very much involved, but not as overtly as before. I can say most of the data that are done and carried out through research find their way into informing what some of these entities and agencies do in their struggle for society.
Yeah, Prof, before I go to Patricia, just on you again, because what I hear from you is, you know, we are still donning that historical halo on our heads, glorifying that, which is a good solitary effort that was put forth then. But what is happening in this epoch of time that we have currently? Why can't we have people who, such as stalwarts like Stella Nyanzi in Uganda, in Kenya, advocating, you know, and for that particular presidential term limit not really happen? Here in the country, we don't see scholars doing that. Just briefly, before we cross over to Patricia, briefly.
But our political challenges are fairly different from those ones you have in Uganda. Extremely fairly different from what you have in Uganda. We don't have that particular kind of term limit debate here. But what we have as a debate in this country is about executive abuse of power. We have got issues of corruption, and I think scholars have put themselves there. Many of us have been at the forefront of talking about BBI, whether opposed to it or against it or supporting it. People have been coming out in a structured manner, I would say. And people, they are public intellectuals, whether at the universities, whether in the universities or outside of the universities, academia that are playing an important role in shaping debates in the manner that they should be shaped. The only problem, as I said again, is when you look at the government again, the political parties, and everyone who is interested in power, they start distancing themselves away from the academics and from intellectuals, because we shall always speak the truth that will be hurting anyone who is interested in subverting democratic tendencies. And that's where they run away.
Patricia, yeah, yes, we had some technical challenges there. You coming through poorly, I don't know. Maybe you can just continue. I don't know if you lost your track of thought, or maybe I can continue with my question, especially when it comes to constitution, because we can see what is happening right now also is, especially for the case of Stella, which we are really hovering on today, I think is a good case for this particular discussion today, is the fact that Computer Misuse Act, many, you know, in Uganda right now, they're really gagging for the scrapping of this particular act as it is right now, which has been systemically used to harass, intimidate, and stifle government critics. I don't know what is the place maybe now of academia when it comes to this particular clamor, given the current state of play.
I would like to get you clearly. Do you mean that in view of the act in particular?
Yes, yeah, in view of the act.
Well, I know that certain provisions are being challenged of the act for violating, because they actually violate the right to expression, as we have all seen, as we have all seen from the Stella Nyanzi case. And the Stella Nyanzi cases are actually still in court. Those have not yet been concluded, but she's now out on bail and so on. But it really shows us that if the Computer Misuse Act is not used effectively, then it's really going to be used to persecute activists, to persecute academics who would like to use the computers and the media, the social media platforms, to champion advocacy. So we have to wait and see where that I want to remain optimistic, because we have seen a good number of our judges, especially the younger ones, becoming a bit more sensitive to aspects of constitutionalism and passing decisions that are actually being celebrated. Because I know one of the Stella Nyanzi decisions, I cannot cite it offhand right now, the judge or magistrate actually said she wasn't liable for the offenses that were brought against her under the Computer Misuse Act, because it could not the prosecution failed to prove whether when those statements were made, they were made when Stella Nyanzi was actually within the jurisdiction of Uganda. Because there's a provision that requires that you must have used the computer or the software to make utterances that are in violation when you're within the jurisdiction of the country. So even that interpretation alone, I remember about 2 months ago, was being celebrated, because you could really see that this judicial officer was trying to ensure that the right to expression is not completely stifled by passing that. It was a technical approach that the judicial officer actually took. But many of those cases against Stella Nyanzi are still in court. But also another thing I wanted to mention about the Professor Stella Nyanzi is the brevity that she has taken to actually now campaign for member of parliament, the women's member of parliament for Kampala. These elections that I told you that right now the preliminaries have started, and we shall have the voting next year around February is when we vote. So we want to watch that space. The last time she was with the People Power Now National Unity NUP organization, and then she moved, I think, back to FDC. And when I last read the story about her on the media, she was the flag bearer for women member of parliament for Kampala under the FDC party, Forum for Democratic Change party. So we want to see where that goes. And you see, this is also really stepping out of the classrooms, what we are talking about today, to begin to see the academics stepping out of the classrooms, taking all this information that we are doing research on, all these debates that we now know from our research, taking it right into the political active space, and say, let us now become the members of parliament, the activists on the front line, and make some of these debates in parliament, etc., premised on better information, empirical studies, because we know that members, if an academic moves into as a member of parliament, I believe that they will speak and their debates will be grounded more on researched information. And this time around, I think I know about, if I count off my fingers, I know about 5 people coming from the academia. I have a friend, a doctor from Chambogo University. There's Professor Birabareba, who stood for presidency last year. He's now vying for member of parliament in his we have a colleague from the law school, actually, from Makerere University Law School. He's called Mr. Nsibambi. He has been teaching company law, but he was also a member of FDC. And he's also joining politics right now. So we can really see that our role is not only in research, but we are beginning to provoke spaces like the parliamentary, the constituency, going for these energies that we have, this information that we have, the researches that we have. If people are not able to read them from the shelves or from the computers, etc., let us go and actually disseminate this information, even in parliament as members of parliament. I would also like to talk about the role of academia in something that we have done as law school. When we had our debate was so topical around the lifting of the term limits, the age limit especially. We as members of staff at the School of Law, Makerere University, were able to write a legal opinion, which we submitted to a legal opinion on why Article 107 should not be removed from amended in the Constitution that dealt with term limits, the positioning and what it meant for constitutionalism and the rule of law in the country. And that legal opinion was submitted to the Speaker of Parliament. And then the question is whether they took it into consideration or not. But that is the angle that we took to join the debate. So we can move away from, in addition to our research, we can take part in writing legal opinions on matters that really affect the state and submitting them before the relevant stakeholders. In the end, of course, the term limit was lifted, and the age limit was also lifted, but at least we know that we stood our ground at that time when the nation needed to hear us as academics. At the law school, we have, you remember, I don't know, we've also participated as amicus. There was in the recent presidential petitions, Amama Mbabazi Museveni. It was a presidential petition from our previous elections. The School of Law academics you know, renowned Professor Joe Lokonyango, Professor Sylvia Tamale, Dr. Kabumba. We're funded under one of the university network activities, a network for public interest lawyers. We got some funding from there to support an amicus team, which constituted academics that I have already mentioned and others, to be the amicus in the presidential petition. And that is the first time the nation to even know the term amicus, and everybody started talking about amicus. What are these amicus people doing in court? What are the academics doing in court on these electoral petition issues? But we wanted the court to have the other angle, look at issues around electoral reforms in this country, beyond whether or not the rigging of elections was really very substantial. But this is also, I wanted to bring this out to say that this is also another strategy that academics, or another way in which academics can join the discourse, the debates, and the advocacies around term limits and so on. So since Kenya is just going into this debate, I think where possible, public interest litigations should come up, championed by academics, with researched data from our academic work to convince the courts that this terrain must not be toyed because of these challenges. And sometimes the courts also need that information and well-researched at that. We can join the platform as amicus, like we did during the Mama Mbabazi presidential electoral commissions. We academics joined in that way to bring to the courts and pray that the court orders or declares that the electoral commission, the government, the attorney general must begin to take on measures to ensure electoral reform in this country. And these measures we are seeing, they are now being implemented to some extent as we move forward to our 2021 elections. So for me, those are some of the other strategies that we can also use or join in as academics in these discussions and debate. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you, Patricia. And what I'm hearing also is the aspect of scholarship of engagement. I think a notion that was driven forcefully by the renowned also scholar Ernest Boyle, the president of Carnegie Academy Institution of Learning. Maybe you can just tell us briefly, Dr. Wandia, when we're talking about the scholarship of engagement, and also this maybe will be something for you to marinate, Dr. Mbani as well. Research, where it consists of research, teaching, integration, and application scholarship that incorporates reciprocal practices of civic engagement into the production of knowledge. Have you seen, especially looking at our current curricula, us going in tandem with civic engagement when we're churning out this particular knowledge or coming up with this particular curricula? Dr. Wandia.
Okay, I think Kenyans have seen me make noise about the curriculum, and especially the school change that we got. I mean, I think, let me just go to what Dr. Mbani was saying. The university and the education system are still very colonial. And colonial doesn't mean that just British rulers. The function of colonialism is to alienate the majority of the people from having a say in their own destiny. That's the essence of colonialism. So even the universities and the education system, the way they are being run by the government, is to prevent Kenyans from participating in conversations that have an impact on their lives, from being informed about the things that they need to know as they make their decisions. That's basically what is happening with the education system from primary all the way to university. It's not only universities that are being affected by this silencing and severe constriction of space. I mean, when you look even at the teachers in the primary and the high schools, they have no say in the curriculum that they get. They are not able to even say what works in the classroom, what challenges they are facing in the classroom. Their views are not taken into account when curriculum is being written. So the reason why the curriculum seems to be out of touch with what is happening in reality is not simply because some academics are not doing their part. It's because the interests that want to prevent public conversations that enhance citizenship are preventing Kenyans and the public from having a say in how they teach and in what they teach. And let me just say that Kenyans need to see this as a dialectic. It's not about one or the other. It's about a conflict between two opposing forces. One force wants democratic participation in knowledge, not just in power, but in knowledge creation and in dissemination of that knowledge. The other force wants to constrict democratic spaces so that Kenyans are not informed and so that Kenyans don't meet together to talk and generate knowledge that can help society. So what happens within the university, as with all other spaces, it's not just in the universities. You have academics who are trying to make their voices heard and are getting increasingly desperate. Like me, I just went to social media because I just found there's no one listening. So you just go to the public and say, this is what is happening. So there's this tension and struggle between the two forces, the anti-democratic ones and the democratic ones. And that war is going on even within the universities. You have academics who have decided to make their peace with the anti-democratic system. Then they are there to make money and get status and become big shots in society. And so they don't want their fellow academics who are doing a work that assists the public. They don't want those academics to have the space to continue that work. So those are the people who undermine our work. And then on top of that, there's the layer of how do you get your work out there? The media houses are very tuned towards government policy, and in fact, it's government officials that are always making the news. So there's a whole system, infrastructure of making sure that Kenyans don't participate in conversations and in knowledge generation that can help them. And that's the tension that we need to understand. It's not one or the other, it's both of them at the same time. And the only way academics can win, the academics who care about the public, the only way they can win is if the public also supports them. Because we are not going to get anywhere by begging State House to listen to us. It's not in their interests. It's not in their interests. It's not in the interests of the people who want to make money and stay in power for us, for academics who speak on the public to have a space in the public sphere. So we are asking Kenyans and East Africans to fight for us as well. This is not a fight that academics can do alone.
Right, it's not a fight that academics can do alone. And let me also hear from Prof. Karuti just chiming in on this as well. Hearing what also Wandie is telling us, it seems like, you know, the whole fraternity is in a pickle as far as this tension is concerned, quite a Teflon tension as it is. I think is, yeah, I promised Dr. Mbani, before I come to you, Prof. Yeah, Dr. Mbani, sorry. I think I jumped the gun there. I went full steam ahead to asking another question before. I wanted you to just weigh in on what Wandia was saying. Mbani.
I think I identify with Wandia. I identify with what Dr. Wandia said. It resonates with what I also believe in. But if I may go back to a statement I made earlier, I think I was serious when I said that our society is based on witchcraft and theft. I was serious. It is something I've reflected on for a long time. Once you found things on witchcraft, you need no research. I don't know, Chair, have you interviewed a witch doctor, for example, to see how they find their knowledge and wisdom? Their methods are not, don't connect with scientific research and inquiry. And that's how our state is run and governed. So the people that govern our state and the society generally has bought into that logic, the logic of witchcraft. So we don't need to produce, we don't need to create. If there's any room for education, therefore, it is for our own fulfillment. And so education is principally for the end of getting a job, for the end of getting employment and promotion at work. So many of the students attend university because they think that they will now buy that big car they've seen Mheshimiwa having, and so they join the course. And all the other schools are closing apart from law, medicine, and engineering. If you run a private university now and you want to open Bachelor of Arts Literature, Bachelor of Arts Philosophy, you won't get 20 students in a year. You will not. But students will be knocking the law and medicine doors because they think there's a future there. And parents have bought into that logic. So we have all joined the thievery, all of us. And so even if you did public participation on the curriculum, the society has bought into this tiffing. And the way they look at education is quite different from what it should be. Which is why I agree with Dr. Njoya that maybe we need a mass movement, but it's beyond just like a few academics. For example, I meet students at university who are already 19, 20 years. Those are the first years I meet. By the time they're coming, they're used to what we call cramming, memorizing. The teacher says something, they read, they cram, or they steal. Even from national schools in Kenya, that's the project. That's what happens. That we celebrate top 10 schools. Everyone got an A in Alliance. Everyone got an A in Star. It's not possible. So they come cramming, looking for grades, not knowledge. So pursuing knowledge for the sake of it has disappeared. And our curriculums have also been wired along those lines. If you're teaching in academic universities, in universities in Kenya, academic boards are asking, how comes your students didn't get A, all of them? Because you also want students to pass. You also want to please them so that you get more clients. And there's a problem across the country. And it's not something one academic institution can do. So what I think we must do, and that's a movement that is bigger than all of us, is to reestablish the need for knowledge, the value for knowledge as an end in itself. So that when someone is pursuing knowledge, they're not laughed at. But as things stand now, we're in a bad place. Think of master's programs. The other professors can testify. People come to masters because they want promotion at work. In fact, if you negotiate with them, I'm talking about 80% plus. If you negotiate with them and give the degree and they pay the money, they will be happy, even if no teaching happens. Because all they wanted is, for law, for example, I am a magistrate, I want to be a judge. I know that a master's will count in that interview. Then I want the master's degree, not because you want knowledge. And we have degenerated to that level. And no amount of change without that education, without that engineering in society will help. No amount of curriculum reviews will help. What I would like to see personally, though, is a curriculum that teaches creativity, self-dependence, self-reliance, our culture, our heritage, our values as a society. And that will not come through the methods we have. It's a man-eating society, it's a witchcraft society, it's a thieving society, and I think we are stuck there unless we do something bigger. Just to mention, now that you're a journalist, when that gentleman in Kenya called, that gentleman in the Rift Valley, Oscar Sudi, speaks, and I speak as an academic, what I speak will not be in the media, will not be aired, will not get prime time, because my knowledge is useless. At Strathmore University, together with the Katiba Institute, we worked together with ICJ. We ran a series of webinars to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Constitution and to criticize where we might have gone wrong, point out what we could do differently in the future. We did probably more than 10 webinars. None of them was aired in the media. Why? We were not Oscar Sudi. And that tells you the value of education in this society. So it needs a revolution to get back education where it deserves to be. And that is before you start talking about a new curriculum. I think that those are my thoughts on this issue. Thank you,
Dr. Ambani. Prof. Karuti, just hearing what Ambani is saying, and I'm inclined also to wonder that yes, we truly have a systemic problem in our institution of higher learning, especially when it comes to curricula. He's spoken of, we ingurgitate a lot and regurgitate that, during the course of our learning. It is just cramming a lot, is a jag and mag theory. So now that we have a problem at hand, and I think they're trying their level best to correct this, going back, to the current, CBC learning that is being or shaken into place in our lower learning institutions as well. I wonder, what is happening with the higher institution as it is? It seems, yes, we'll be having a lot of this happening from the ground, but when it is being channeled through the bottle, there'll be a bottleneck there from the institution of higher learning because nothing is changing from the top. Prof.
Thank you very much, Deva. But before I answer your question, I think we need to reflect on what Ambani has said about you, the media, not you in particular.
Yeah, you might have noticed I glossed over that a bit.
Yes, we wanted to run away from it, but we won't allow you to run away. The media is part of the problem this country and the countries in the region are facing today.
Yes.
The media of the 1990s was very progressive media that would have picked ideas from the society and made them very useful for the future development of the society. Today's media is interested in the bottom line profit. How much is it? When the Council of Governors threaten not to carry your advertisements, you cry. You almost go to your knees to apologize so that you don't lose those advertisements. And anytime the government makes a statement that we are not going to advertise with you because you have attacked us, the media shakes. In other words, the media is no longer actually living to what it's supposed to be doing. It's living for profits and it's market driven and nothing else. So it's not the universities alone. And that's the point Abani is making. It's not the universities alone that have lost track, even the media, just like the religious institutions. The only thing I would like to disagree with Ambani is the issue of witch doctors. I hope we can compare how pastors, priests behave and tell me whether they are different from the witch doctors. They all use the same paraphernalia, same attitude, same, I'd let people not think that they don't go to church, but there is a very good similarity that they tend to look at the same thing in the same manner. But we need to start asking ourselves, how do we take back the universities to serve the society better? The problem we are facing in East Africa today, and in particular in Kenya, the problem of Kenya is the result of the 844 system of education. It did not provide opportunities for children to start having critical thinking. It started producing children that can only copy and paste. And many middle-class parents, instead of agitating for change, decided to take their children to international private schools where critical thinking is the order of the day. But that's not providing a solution, because what you have done instead is to leave the children of ordinary persons who cannot take their children to private schools to be left under a curriculum that is not relevant for their future. Is there a way that we can make the curriculum good for the future? There is, and I don't think CBC has been debated enough in terms of what it is offering Kenya's future society. If you look at CBC and the language that is being used even by policymakers, they want to start refocusing the society towards sciences more than anything else. And I don't think that's what we are calling the foundation of our future. The foundation of the future in terms of sustainable development is a situation where we say we want relevant knowledge irrespective of whatever it is, and providing an opportunity for children to become critical thinkers in the society. The problem that we have is reflecting also in the universities. And I disagree again with Wadia, my colleague, the first time I have disagreed with her. It's not that there are instances where people want to sit down comfortable and earn and be promoted to their positions. No, the problem in our universities is that we have got progressives and conservatives. And the conservatives are a majority. The progressives are very few. And there are people who are always in trouble for wanting to reform the system, whether it's in the university, whether it's in the society, name it. But remember, a majority of the people teaching at the universities today, through what system did they come through? That's also a fundamental question. We are not in the universities of 70 when many lecturers were children of peasants. Now we are in a situation where we have even children of middle class teaching at the universities. And this would not have been the case in the old days, because children of the peasants are the ones who would find comfort teaching in the university. After all, there wasn't a lot of money then. Some of us started teaching at the University of Wadia when I was earning $25. The University of Nairobi used to be paid the least, down from the bottom. The bottom most was DRC, followed by Nigeria, then University of Nairobi. I'm part of that particular bottom. I never left the university. But now that the university is paying a better money, And before, you even start seeing children of middle class wanting to come to the university. They are the majority conservatives who are messing up what the universities should be. Let me stop there.
Could, because in the interest of also time, there are comments that are here, and I'll be actually throwing them to you to maybe comment on them as well. But before we head there, we cross over to Patricia, because, you know, I was reading about the politics also in course curriculum that is very important as well. And this also is what we're talking about in the broader curriculum that we're talking. And they were saying the politics needs to be taught from childhood, and it should be taught at the university level as well, which of course we know is being done. Socrates and Plato, for example, sought to teach people of certain class philosophy till the 50s as well. So my question is, maybe it should be a comparative politics that we are bringing to play right now. Patricia, you can try and just broaden our understanding as well. What is happening, especially in your institutions of academia, in comparison to what we are having here in the country? Are we as progressive as some of us are here in the country, and we have majority who are conservatives? Or where are they leaning in Uganda? In the progressives, like where we have Stella Nyanzi, or majority also in the conservative? And is this maybe an East African community problem?
Well, picking it up from what Professor said, that in the university you have progressive thinkers and the conservatives. Certain Makerere University must be sharing that concern as well, that there are probably progressive thinkers within the university and the conservatives. But even when Professor mentioned it, I kind of questioned myself. I want to say it with reservation, because I have not really, I can't speak with authority that we have this number of conservatives, or we lean more towards the conservatives. But what I can say is, indeed, we have academic staff who are very robust, who are very progressive in their thinking. They take part in all these debates in the country. They're from the political science department. Those are the ones I listen to a lot. The political science department, the School of Gender Studies, the School of Law, and then also the science people, people from the science department are making their inroads. And it's true what was said earlier, that you see that the government is leaning more towards supporting the sciences because of that notion of or argument around scientific innovations, and the sciences are more important in this country, in Uganda, and the sciences must be supported more. You see that even in the university, there's a presidential fund initiative, but I think 90% of those funds going to the science department. So really, even recently with the COVID, the university got funds. It was funds from the president's office to do research, with the RIF funds to do research, and many of the grants were awarded to the people who submitted scientific related proposals. So you really see that there's that bias towards the science. That is what we have really talked about. But I, for one, also believe in the school of thought that we are a country and people who must complement each other. We have good scientists, we have good artists, and all this is important. When I do my legal work, sometimes I do my legal work in a Mulago hospital, then you find that the patients, as much as they need the medical interventions, they also have concerns how it will happen to their children if they die. So now those are not interventions that will come from the scientific discourse. They are interventions that require legal or counseling, humanitarian, social science or social works interventions. So I think we need that complementarity as a country. And even in the university, we need that complementarity. We have progressive thinkers, they come out, they speak about the debates in the country, but we have those who keep quiet. But I cannot really speak with authority as a lawyer that majority are the conservatives or majority are the progressives, but we have a mix of both.
Let me just pick some of the comments that I can see here from the chat room, and I can throw one to you, Dr. Wandea. I know you've gone through some of them, but I like what Chris Kakering is saying or commenting on, and he's asking, is blaming the government for academic irrelevance enough? Doesn't academia have a duty to make themselves relevant? Yes. Having identified the problem, what does academia do to make themselves relevant again?
The question of relevance is a naughty question, because all human beings are relevant to their society. So what we have is not irrelevant institutions, but institutions fighting against people participating in their destiny. And so when the people in power don't want us to comment on what is happening in society, they call us irrelevant. They say what you're saying is not relevant. In fact, a lot of times when I comment on public issues, the very issues which Kenyans say they want to hear our voice on, I'm told what I'm saying is irrelevant. But that term, irrelevance, is a way of silencing people. So universities do not really need to go out of their way to be relevant. The only reason why they are doing it is because it's not in their DNA. If we are to go back to Dr. Ambani's comments, it's not in our DNA as a colonial institution to involve the public in what we do and to value the contributions of public engagement. And that's why this thing of relevance has become an obsession, and especially among the people in power, because they want to use the question of relevance to tell the public, to turn the public against the university. Now, let me push back on what Dr. Kanyinga said. First, I don't agree that the problem was with 844. I went through the older system and I don't think it was any better. We were beaten into agreeing with the system, and it's just because we were so few and we were able to go to university and have chapati and ice cream at the government's expense that we think we were necessarily better than the 844s who came when there was no boom and where the opportunities had been expanded, because Moi, rightly so, and I'm not saying that I love him and his rule, but he rightly saw that academia was being dominated by people who already had privilege. So when he opened it up to all communities from Kenya, that's when this narrative of the problem is 844 started. And I think we, the older academics, need to be conscious of that political issue before we criticize 844. And when it comes to now the university, it is true that many of the academics today come from the middle class, but they are the middle class children of the academics who are children of peasants. So what has happened with the university is that because the opportunities have become so few, it's only middle class kids who already have access to English, who have access to university education and to professionalism, who are able to pass and to game the education system well enough to enter universities. So this is not a problem of just the class background of the students that we are getting. It's a problem of a bad economy. The economy is alienating everybody. If you come from a poor family, you are unlikely to pass well enough to go to university. And so what is happening with my generation of academics and the ones who are coming in is that we are the same people. And it's actually very annoying, for me at least, that now the people who do well are the children of teachers. So we are basically recycling the same people in the university system. We are not getting people from backgrounds where education is limited to become voices in the university, because the economy is doing so badly that people are desperate. And so you see, right now, my students, undergraduate students, are saying they want to be lecturers. It makes me so sad. And not because I don't think lecturing is a good thing, but it's because they are seeing lecturing as an economic and prestigious position. They no longer see us as people who are passionate about society, who want to do something for society. They just see us as people who talk and we drive away. And that's not what is happening with school teachers. That is not happening with fundis, with carpenters, with mama mboga. So this is an economic problem. And the difference is being attributed to education when in fact it's a political problem. And Kenyans have to start talking about the politics of the way our economy is run in favor of a few who now want to give themselves who want to remove their limits on their terms in office. And the economy is structured towards foreigners and the rich in Kenya. And that is why the more we are squeezed economically, the more the next generation wants to enter the university as a means to economic improvement. And then I would say that that now goes back to what Dr. Ambani was saying about the problem with our society. Our society does not value knowledge. And let me tell Kenyans that there is no society that gains wealth through ignorance. It's not by knowing nothing that you are able to generate an income. You have to know the society you are in. You have to know where you came from and what is happening around you. You cannot make money, quote unquote, by being ignorant. But we have been sold this lie that wealth does not depend on knowledge. And of course, we believe it because the two superpowers which are pushing this message in Kenya are using guns and threats, na kifua, to threaten the world when they don't get their way. And so we start to think that knowledge means nothing. But we have to come back to our cultures, to our legacies, to our ancestors who knew that wisdom is so important to society.
Thank you, Dr. Wandia there. Maybe I should emphasize also what Kakering is asking in regard to what the question I'd actually posed to Dr. Wandia. He continues to ask, but are you taking responsibility for any of it? There is no question that the government has put a stranglehold on academic freedom, but there has to be a way to push back, isn't there? Am I sensitive to the corner? Or I am sensitive to the corner that academics have been painted in, but shouldn't we also demand more from academics?
No, what Mr. Catering is saying is very reactionary. He's not listening to the various issues we are grappling with. We are not talking about blame and assigning responsibility and all that kind of thing. What we are saying is that these are the forces that we are grappling with. We are grappling with a society that has been jaded by love of money, that is still grappling with colonial legacies. We are grappling with a government that has politicians who don't want to let go of power. We are grappling with the fact that as human beings, even we academics are affected by these forces. We share some of the public values about money and social status. So what we are trying to say is that we have all these issues that we are grappling with, and finding a space for academic freedom requires that we grapple with all those issues. I'm not looking for responsibility and blaming and exonerating or blaming the government. I actually don't care. What I care for is a society that has space for people to come together, to think, to ask questions, and generate knowledge that benefits all of us. What I am asking is why this is not happening. It's not whether government is responsible for anything.
Thank you, Dr. Wandia. All right, over to you, Dr. Ambani, with this question from Lokala Esinyan, and he's asking, what efforts is the academia exerting to innovate new means of financing higher education to escape the trap of government dictating the programs to be funded as being proposed currently in Kenya by the government of Kenya?
I think I'd mentioned earlier that it's a miracle that we exist as academics. That's the biggest miracle in this realm, because I said the universities are owned by two major institutions, the church and the mosque, and the government on the other side in Kenya. Check, apart from a few like Mount Kenya University, which is maybe purely business. The others are government or religion. That means that academics in Kenya have to work within those, within those boundaries. It's very expensive to start a university. So which means that as an individual, it will take a lot to make one after my own liking. I have to work within the universities that exist. And that therefore means that change, serious or fundamental revolutionary change is not going to come that easily. I think one must concede that. But then I think that we can do something within this limited space. If we look at the university, for example, as a place of ideas, and I agree with the Karuti, with Wandia, that there are also progressive and conservative academics. It's possible that progressive academics, for example, can come together. In the past, they did that through maybe NGOs. Like Karuti mentioned, I happened to work with the Center for Law and Research International earlier, which was headed by Professor Kibwana and Smokino Wanjala. And those were academics that came together. Karuti was part of it, Winnie Mitula, and all that. They came together there to think, to reflect, and to write, when they couldn't do that within the university because the university was headed by conservative political leadership. So I think it's still possible that though we can't bring down this as an individual, it's very hard. We can begin conversations outside the university, within the university, putting together like-minded groups and do certain activities. But there are still those activities that still can go on within the university, like teaching. I think one can still teach in a university, largely, and mentor students, inspire them, bring knowledge to them. That's still very much possible within the universities we have. In terms of, even if I may join this debate of taking responsibility, I think I agree that many academics are in because they have no other job. In fact, some people come back to teach when they have been sacked wherever they were, or when they have not gotten the job they're looking for. And so they're just in, to shelter. And that shows you that then the academics you have are not passionate about research, about generating knowledge, about impacting society. And that's a big problem. And maybe that's where that's maybe why Karuti was talking about these middle class academics coming in. I don't agree that it's the middle class who are responsible for this. I agree though that some lecturers have slept on their job, things they could have done. In the era of internet, surely you don't need a university to help you that much. You can liberate yourself and research and even have your outputs out there. So I think that would be my answer, that while it is hard to bring down the universities as they are, remember they are in colonialism, they're into government agenda, they're into religious agenda. It's hard to bring that. That is difficult to bring down. But as individuals, there are a few things we can begin to do day at a time to see how we reform the societies in which we find ourselves.
Fair enough, Dr. Mbani. Let me just rope in Prof on this. Kakering is still asking, isn't political co-opting of universities also a problem? From the days of Moi, when his apologists were put in positions of leadership and at the universities, it seems that the universities have never gotten their independence back. Can academics be productive with social engagement if they don't first clean their own house?
To be honest, I don't think that that's an appropriate question, because we need to ask ourselves, how are the universities co-opted and strangulated at that particular time during the Moi period? And the same thing we can ask about Makerere today. I mean, Makerere is also suffering the same. We've seen Makerere giving politicians different types of medals and names for different things. But it's not a question of cleaning our own house. I said from the very beginning that we have got conservatives and progressives, and the conservatives seem to be the people who are usually in leadership of these particular positions. But let me also make a very good clarification here. Universities across the region, including in Kenya here, are now in the leadership of people not necessarily interested in the academy. They are in leadership of people interested sometimes in money and many other things. But I am yet to see leadership of a university in Kenya or Tanzania or Uganda that says that we are coming to provide a leadership that is going to take the university back to what the universities should be. Production of knowledge, be a space for ideas, be a space for research, be a space for cutting edge knowledge for the future of the development of our societies. We are yet to see that. And simply because the government plays an important role even in the appointment of the universities, probably we are not yet to get the independent leadership that we would be going for. If the councils of the universities, public universities, were to be appointed differently, maybe we could have that. But if we have not got it right even within the private universities, if we have not got it right even within the missionary universities, I think there is a fundamental problem. But let's ask ourselves, what role is it do we play in the society as universities? Even production of ideas alone and whatever people do with the ideas we produce is sufficient. Ours is not actually to see where you're going to put the ideas we produce, but as long as we produce ideas that we think is good for the future of our society and for the betterment of the society, that's enough. And the people we train them for a better society and to think as better citizens and even to have better knowledge, revolutionary. We mentioned from the very beginning that students these days do not even bother about revolutionary thinking. We no longer teach Marxism the way we used to teach Marxism, and yet it's the foundation of many, many, many things we have. Simply because many students are not interested.
Thank you.
You notice that even when there are very serious struggles in the society and you ask the students whether they are joining the struggles, the first thing they ask is, where do I park my car?
Thank you, Prof. Because of interest of time, let me just also rope in Patricia, even as we are remaining with a few minutes to just wind up. I know we are pinched for time, but Patricia, just hearing from Professor that yes, we are not even raising revolutionary anymore. Is it also the same in Uganda? Because here in Kenya, I know we've been so much navel gazing on STEM, you know, the sciences, the mathematics, the technical bit of it, engineering and all. I don't know how it is in Uganda, because yes, what now we are putting in the labor market are people who are more oriented on the sciences, but the humanity that drives, you know, the people is not there. So the humanities also in the universities, people are becoming greatly shy to take, you know, to actually enroll for humanity courses as well. I don't know what will be your opinion on this in terms of just bringing out a holistic society that is well balanced. Very briefly.
But for me, I would advocate that we need to have a comprehensive society where both the persons with the talent and skills in sciences are developed and sufficiently funded to develop those skills and innovations just as much as those in the humanities, because it's a society that needs the services of all.
Right, we seem to have a technical challenge there with Patricia. All right, she's not coming through clearly. But now I want to just give, because we are pinched for time and we need to close. Patricia, you're back, I can see. Yeah, just continue. I hope you've not lost your track of thought.
Yes, so just to wrap it up, I'll simply say, so and the discussion really around the curriculum development, we must also revise. Uganda is also revising its curriculum, even at the university. We are trying to think about more student-centered learning, where students are not just regurgitating what they are taught in the classroom, but let's take the students out to do internships, to work in parliament, for instance, in certain other departments, to engage in moots that have a bearing on constitutionalism and so on. Right now, I have students placed in refugee camps to provide services in the hope that with such exposure, the students will begin to appreciate, as citizens of this country and for the future, will become revolutionary, begin to appreciate the relevance of good governance, the relevance of constitutionalism in the country, and how we must all live as one and respect humanity and the diversities that we have in society, even as they go on to their different walks of life. So in the interest of time, allow me conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think also that will act as your conclusion and your closing remarks as well. Thank you very much. Maybe we can also get some closing remarks from Dr. Wandia, briefly, 30 seconds.
Okay, what I would say to Kenyans is what I've already said. Society needs different spaces for democratic engagement. The university is just one, and we should protect all those spaces. We can't leave it to only Parliament and State House to have conversations about what happens to Kenya, and the same applies to all other countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wandia. Let's hear from Dr. Sogo Ambani. Your closing remarks, sir, 30 seconds.
Yes, the struggle continues, and I think I see the struggle in two realms. One, to change the hierarchy so that education comes where it belongs, at the top, and then decolonize the university so that it comes back to society. I think those two will be the struggles I'm looking forward to, and I want to be part of it, and I am happy that this conversation has begun.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambani. Professor Karuti, can you maybe also your closing remarks, 30 seconds?
There is no society that develops without ideas. And those ideas are produced by universities. And there is no idea, whether in science or in art or arts, that is better than the other. All ideas are part of the knowledge that we require for a better society, and this division between science, natural and social sciences should end. Is a debate that should be carried outside by people who have never had an idea about what society they want. Thank you.
Right. It will be fair also just to give you 30 seconds, Patricia, as well from Uganda, as your closing remarks.
Thank you, and my fellow participants. I've also learned a lot what is happening in Kenya. And to reiterate what you as the moderator said earlier, education is the best weapon we can use to change the country. So let us hope that we shall continue to use all platforms, just like Dr. Wandia has said, to educate every single person in our respective countries, irrespective of their social standing, because we all have a stake to ensure that our countries are driven in the right direction.
Thank you. I just want to thank you again, our panelists, for quite a potent, interesting discussion that we've had today. And thank you for the intellectual vigor that you've brought to the table today. And I hope this is just the beginning of, trying to steamroll this particular discussion on presidential term limits and consolidating democracy, especially in East Africa, now that we can see a lot of a breaching is happening when it comes to, the constitution and trying to extend, the terms of presidency or whoever is in power, save for Senegal, which is trying to contract that even the particular tenure from 7 to actually 5 years, which is dramatically different from other countries here in Africa. So I want to thank you warmly for being amazingly patient. I can see, yes, we've just extended by 20 minutes, but nonetheless, thank you that you've actually contributed largely to this conversation and you've made it a success today. Thank you, Patricia, Tim, also for coming through, at a pinch, just by a whisker, the last minute. Thank you so much. And you've actually done very well today. I want to thank you. And on behalf also of Katiba Institute and Kituo Katiba in Uganda, we want to thank you for making this possible. And this also has been powered by the National Democratic Institute that has made also this a success. We thank you, our partners, for this as well. Thank you also for our participants online for your questions. We thank you so much for sticking with us and also being amazingly patient. My name is Dibala Inair. I've been your facilitator, and I take this moment now to adjourn this particular forum this afternoon. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.